Hey guys, I'm just going to do a quick 5-minute video just to recap what we've done on circular flow of income in today's lesson. I am not going to be doing this after every lesson that we do in macroeconomics. I want to make that clear. You must come to your lessons because your lessons provide an opportunity to ask me questions on what we've done. However, I do want to do these very short little videos to ensure that you completely understand what we've done. If you don't understand the circular flow of income, you don't have a chance of understanding the rest of the course. It is absolutely fundamental that you understand this. So because of that, for that only reason, I'm going to do these couple of videos after each lesson this week, just to recap what we've learned in that lesson. So you can watch them if there's any problems which have occurred to you in the lesson, or as you've gone over it, anything that comes up. Okay, so I'm going to use the same sheets in the lesson as well to help you understand what your notes are. Okay, it'll be very short because obviously I haven't got to explain it as slowly as I would normally do. So here we have the circular flow of income. The circular flow of income gives us an explanation of how the economy runs as a whole. It's called the circular flow because it's circular and because it shows how the money flows round the system. Okay, sometimes I shorten it down to circle flow, okay, as a shortened way of saying circular flow. At the top, we have households. Households purchase goods and services from firms, okay? They consume goods and services from firms. Firms then produce an output to allow for these goods and services to be consumed by households. They produce them. And to produce these goods and services, they hire factors of production: land, labour, capital and enterprise. Now, these factors of production come from households because households are the workers that firms employ. But these factors of production are more than that because factors of production is land, labour, capital and enterprise. So households are the ones that own the land, households are the ones that own the labour, households are the ones who set up the firms, the enterprise, and households are the ones that provide the capital. So therefore, households consume goods and services, for which firms then produce an output to allow for the goods and services to be consumed. And for firms to then make this output, they employ factors of production that come from households. So money flows from households to firms and back from firms to households. Now, there's nowhere for this money to escape. So any money that leaves from households that goes to firms will go back from firms up to households. This shows the interdependent nature of households and firms, that as money goes from one, it flows back. Yeah, that was going to happen. Just 1 second. Okay. So to show that now, this interdependent nature, we've now got a few figures. So as £100 billion flows out from households, it goes down to firms, and then £100 billion goes back up. Now, the next most important thing is a bit of terminology. So here we have national expenditure. Expenditure is another word for spending. So consumption and expenditure are similar types of words for the same thing, spending money. So this consumption here could be called national expenditure. For firms to produce the goods which households consume or create this national expenditure, this means that firms have to provide a national output, because outputs are the goods and services which households then consume or expend money on. For firms to produce this output, they need to employ factors of production. To employ factors of production, they need to provide them with a national income or an income. As we know, factors of production, the income of factors of production is rent, wages, interest and profits, okay, related to land, labour, capital and enterprise. So we need to pay factors of production and income for them to be hired. So this creates a national income. Now, all of these are the same. National expenditure has to be the same as national output, which has to be the same as national income. And the reason for this is there's nowhere else for the money to flow. It has to go from households to firms and firms back to households because there's nowhere else for it to go. And that's why it's 3 lines and not 2. It's not an equals, it's a must be the same as, because there's nowhere else for the money to go. Now what we're going to start to do is add some complexity to this. Not a lot of complexity. There's no way that you could draw a diagram that would show the complexity of our economy, particularly if you're an Austrian economist or Hayekian economist. That would be completely impossible for you. But what we try and do is add in extra levels of complexity. So we add in the idea of a banking system. We add in the idea of external trade. And we add in the government. So all we're trying to do is show some of the key players in the economy. We can't show them all, but we try and show some. So the first thing we show here is banks. So what we say is that households don't consume every penny that they receive. In fact, households save. Now, it may be 1% of their income. It could be 50% of their income. And this would change dependent on the person, dependent maybe on the time of year. You spend more, you save more before Christmas. And then you spend a lot more the month before Christmas. You save running up to your summer holidays. It's going to change if you're in the middle of a pandemic. People save a lot more at the moment than they've ever saved before. And culturally, some consumers save more in some countries than others. So, for example, the Chinese are heavy savers. In Germany, heavy savers. In the UK, we don't save as much. So it changes on culture, on person, and it will also change as the year progresses at different times of the year. But generally speaking, households will save some of their income. Now, this saving is a leakage or withdrawal from the circular flow, because money that could have gone from households down to firms doesn't. Instead, some of it leaks out, leaves. So if you had £100 billion up here from households and 90 billion going here in consumption, savings must be 10, because there's nowhere else for the money to go. It can only go for consumption or to savings. And this money goes into banks. Now, if we were to assume that this 90 carries on round the circular flow through to firms, back up there to households, this would be now 90. Because this 90s travel down here to firms and back up here to households, the amount available for households for the next round would be 90. And this would show that the economy has shrunk, because now there was £100 billion spent by households, but for the next round, it's now only 90. The economy's got smaller. However, we haven't assumed here there's anything for investment, because whilst households save, banks invest in firms. Now, I know that firms save, and I know that households invest. You can go to the bank, you can borrow £10,000 and put a conservatory on your house. You can invest in your own property. I know that. However, this model is not complex enough to show all these things. So we assume that only households save and only firms invest. Now, in this model which I've drawn, households consume 90, they save 10, but then firms invest this £10 billion from banks back towards the firm. So they buy new machinery, they employ new staff, they produce a new good, all of which they need to borrow money for. So households save the 10 billion, and this 10 billion then is used by banks to reinsert, to go back into firms. So therefore, the value of this green line here, this national income line, which is the most important of the three, national output, national expenditure, national income, this is the most important because it shows us here consumption is 10 and this investment, so consumption is 90, this investment is 10, which means that this national income here is 100. C plus I equals 100. C plus I equals 100. C plus I equals 100. So it's 100 going back up here. So So what does that mean if we're looking at a disequilibrium situation where it's not 100? Equilibrium is where there's no tendency to change. What if I've got a situation where the national economy has changed, it's got bigger or it's got smaller? How can we show that? Well, let's have a look at this top one here. So here I've got households and I've got firms. I've got exactly the same, but I've just drawn it smaller. So we've got 10 billion coming out of households. We've got 10 billion, 90 billion going down in savings. Sorry, consumption, 10 billion in savings. But I've got 20 in investments. This means that national income is 90 plus 20, which means that national income is 110, which means that our economy is growing. Because up to households here, there would be 110. 110 is greater than 100. Underneath here, we've got households and firms. Households 100, consumption's 90, savings is 10. Investment is only 5. So therefore, the value of my national income is 90 plus 5. The value of my national income is 95. So therefore, my economy is shrinking. It started off as 100. It's now ended up as 95. So my economy is shrinking. Both of these situations show disequilibrium because the starting amount is not the same as the ending amount. But one of the disequilibriums is a good disequilibrium and one is a bad, because one shows economic growth and one shows a shrinking of the economy. So that's all we've done in this first lesson of looking at circular flow. The idea that there is a circular flow, the different terms and terminologies used, why national income is so important, how we add up national income, as national income is C plus I, and what happens when there are disequilibriums. So after each lesson this week, we'll try and do one of these little videos, which is there to support you, but you must come to lesson. This does not mean that you can't come to lesson and watch these videos instead, because in the lesson, I will go through it far more complexly, and in the lesson, I'll explain it to you more. Now I'm just recapping. Okay, bye.